Hello, so I'm with Kalpesh today. Kalpesh, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Very good. Very good. Can't complain. A nice
Jolly good.
chilly afternoon in the UK.
So, listen, for those in the audience, can you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Kalpesh Baxi. I have been involved in the staffing ecosystem now for coming up to 25 years. I started my career working for an organisation called S3, which is now a FTSE listed organisation. What do I do today? So I do two fundamental things. I'm an angel investor in HR tech or people tech type companies. But my main day job is I'm an advisor to companies within the recruitment and the HR tech ecosystem. So commonly known as the future of work in today's world.
Great stuff. Now, I know you also share with me, Kalpesh, a passion about neuro-inclusivity and diversity. Where does that interest come from?
Do you know, Ian, it's probably twofold, and we've managed to get to know each other for sort of almost a year now. So I suppose my original passion came from a work point of view where I probably was part of the problem, where it was matching job specs to candidates available and not fully understanding individuals and what they can do and how they operate. If I take it more from a holistic point of view and more from a personal point of view, there are individuals in my family that were struggling to get opportunities. You start understanding what's going on. And the more and more I looked into it, the more and more I started understanding that actually neuro-inclusivity, if done right, can actually be a positive. So to understand how, if you have ADHD, how you can really make a positive impact in the world of work, or if you're dyslexic, how you think differently to solve problems. And then as I went on the journey, I was like, okay, look, we have a talent shortage. We are struggling to fill jobs in this country and across the world at the moment. How can we lock into this untapped community of neuro-inclusive talent to be able to deal with the challenges in the workforce, i.e. not finding enough people, but also help them try and solve some of the big problems that we've got in society that we struggle to resolve.
And Kalpesh, I mean, I think like me, you'll probably be talking to some people officers, HR leaders, and when you talk to them about the opportunity for neuro-inclusivity and diversity across their workforce, they're kind of nodding. They're not fighting against it. So what's holding them back?
I think with all of these things, Ian, it's lack of understanding and lack of ability to impact. So if you think about for corporates particularly, and I think, look, just as a health warning, there are some amazing companies doing some incredible stuff. And you introduced me to a lady from EY who I think has got a fantastic program that she's trying to drive in her organisation. But the typical thing is, if you think about a corporation today, you've got different forces and priorities that you're working towards. So as much as you want to try and do the right thing and support neuro-inclusive talent or support diverse talent, on the other side of it, you're also trying to deal with redundancies, operational performance, the organisation hitting their numbers, a change in landscape. So the biggest single challenge that organisations face today is competing priorities to be able to see through the scheme of work. And then the final bit is actually, and it's something you and I have spoken about a few times, is how do you get that exec sponsorship, that person at the top that says, no, this isn't about tick boxing or hitting our ESG reporting, but actually fundamentally we want to make a difference, want to permeate it all the way through the organisation, and they become your master champion.
And are there quick wins in this as you see it, Kalpesh?
Yeah, I think there are. I think that stage one is I would say to any corporation, go and have a look internally. Go and understand your workforce today and try and understand the demographics or the diversity within that. Whether you are looking at the 9 protected characteristics or you're looking at it and say, look, I just want to start with neuro. Let's have a look who we've got in our organisation and then start creating those communities and those groups to actually give them an opportunity of coming together and then championing them in terms of the positive stuff that they're actually doing for the organisation. So if you think about really simply, if you need someone that understands how to get from A to B really quickly, actually someone like an ADHD person, someone with ADHD, it's probably quite a good person to have because they're not patient enough to see through that challenge for over 6, 9, 12 months. they're going to try and get them from A to B as quickly as they can and try and find a solution to get there as well.
Yeah, and do you think? I mean, obviously, you and I deal with people that are on the on payroll side of a business for recruitment, and also on the contingent workforce hiring side of things. I mean, is it a problem on both sides? Is one side learning from the other? What's your view of the kind of balance between both areas of business?
So I think the short answer is there's a challenge on both sides. The contingent workforce side is trying to deliver against client briefs and client specs. And typically, if you think about people that are supplying contingent workforce, there is a need, solve the need, get me the bodies effectively to solve my problem, to be able to deliver R&D, deliver technology, etc. From a corporate side of it, they are still trying to learn the right and wrong way of doing it. And they're looking for advice from the contingent suppliers. So there's almost a sort of a challenge on both sides of the market where the other one is expecting the other one to solve the problem. The short answer is both need to come together and agree a scheme and an approach to try and move forwards.
Yeah. Now, moving on to the subject of data-driven business decisions, because you and I are going to be on a panel shortly to talk about that. What's your relationship? What's your perspective of the relationship between the data-driven systems that are coming through now and how leaders of talent are embracing that?
So we have a real challenge in this space at the moment. So, and again, going back to a previous conversation, not taking away from the wonderful hour that we're going to have shortly, it's who owns the data, who delivers the data, who values the data. So you've got all of these suppliers coming in saying, look, we can do D&I, data analytics, we can supply X, Y, and Z. If you go into a corporation, is it the CPO that owns that people data? Is it driven by finance? Is it driven by the CEO? So I think the big challenge that we have is you can have one piece of data that means different things to different stakeholders. And where organizations need to get agreement very quickly is who owns that data and how will it be used to make decisions. And I think the big thing about this is how do you make impact? How do you make progress? Getting more and more reports is not valuable.
And do you think the industry starved of data, or is just not looking at it, or has it been forgotten?
So I think different companies are going through a different challenge at the moment, Ian. So some organisations are drowning in data. They have too much and they just don't know where to start. Other organisations, the data is in the wrong place. It's not structured properly to provide them with the insight that they need to impact. And there are other organisations, and some of these other organisations that I'm referring to are actually big corporates. They just don't have enough data. There's nothing there. So there are three different problems, but fundamentally, as you and I both know, you need the data to get the insight, to get the action, to move forwards.
So as we stand today, are you seeing the talent leaders making data-driven decisions generally, or are they not making it? Or what's your sense check on where we are at the moment?
I think organisations and talent leaders are trying to make the right decision, quite often based on the information that they have. But I'll go back to my original point. You need the right data and insight to make the right decisions. If you don't have the right information, you're always going to keep making the wrong decisions. And then the second part of it is you can have all the data and insight in the world. If it doesn't line up with the organisation's current priorities, you still won't act on it.
And this conversation about total talent management and this balance between both sides of the hiring side and the on payroll side, are you seeing that happening? And if it is or it isn't, how well is it being done?
So I think if you go back to total talent, it means different things to different people. That's probably the first challenge. For some people, total talent is all the different type of employees you can have, from FTEs to fractional to contracts, etc. The other definition of total talent management is about actually how do you attract, hire, retain, build your talent pool, and keep people in the organisation going forward. So again, if we go back to the big change post-COVID, I think companies are now trying to do this more because there is a fundamental problem. They cannot afford to keep losing staff because they can't afford to keep hiring staff.
Mm.
And the simple challenge is very simply, if you lose someone and the salary inflation means they're going to cost you more money, but also actually trying to find someone to replace that role is incredibly hard.
And in some respects, I mean, I'm listening to the direction of our conversation today, Kalpesh, and we've touched on three issues. We've touched on diversity hiring and neuro-inclusivity. We've touched on data and data-driven decisions, and also we've just mentioned total talent management and the responsibility and accountability for this whole area. There are three issues going on there, aren't they, that are kind of separate but also linked as well, I think. If you're advising talent leaders at the moment, where are you starting with those three things?
So my sort of general principle is, before you go and start hiring, start looking internally first. So before you start coming up and say, look, we need to have a talent attraction strategy, you should probably think about a retention strategy first, or how are you going to look after your incumbent workforce? How are you going to make sure your culture's right? How are you going to make sure the career structures are right? How are you going to make sure you've got a great retention strategy or retention strategies? Because where most companies are falling down is they focus more on, I need to go and hire more people in, which is great. But then these people land in an organisation and very quickly this is not what I signed up for. So they leave anyway, they churn. So my typical answer is, you have to start with your current incumbent workforce and build a talent management strategy that covers them. Then think about how you're going to go out and attract. Now, the reality is, Ian, you and I both know, you actually need to do both at the same time. Unfortunately, you can't do one or the other. But if I had a choice, I'd always start by getting your internal strategy right first before you go out and hire externally.
Which is interesting, because when I'm talking to people about brand and brand strategy, we're always talking about building out your personality first and then communicating it. It sounds as though that's a similar message.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, if you think about personality, your culture, your organisational DNA, however you badge it, your EVP, I think, we're all comfortable with the term employee value proposition. Effectively, what organisations need to be really clear on is, what is my promise to someone that works in my organisation today? Then the next stage is, what is my promise to someone who joins my organisation today?
And I think one of the key learning lessons I had, Kalpesh, from last year's conversations with HR leaders is they were saying, basically, we can't eat the whole pizza at once. We've got to have a realistic next step, in our journey. For you, what are you advising on what that next step should be?
So I think that one of the conversations I'm having is about 2024 and saying, look, before, and again, you and I both come from a solutions world. Before you go and buy new technology, work out what you need to do first of all. So my first stage is, go and engage the C-suite, because if you don't have C-suite engagement, whatever you end up doing will just fall over anyway. But also try and understand more about your current workforce. So what makes you special as an employer, first of all? What systems are you using? Because you might actually find you've got features in systems that you have today that can enable you to achieve this outcome. And then link that back down to saying, right, what do I need to do to bring new talent in? What new technology do I need? But it does come back to, if you do not have exec sponsorship in an organisation, any initiative or any program will fail.
And for yourself personally, Kalpesh, what's the ambition for 2024 for you?
So I think personally for me, I'm looking forward to getting involved in more companies that are now going to stop talking about it and do something about the challenges coming face. So I think neuro-inclusivity, it's certainly hit the agenda, and I'm talking to more and more companies about how that can be resolved. D&I think, rather than talking about just diversity, I think clients understand about that is very important in the process about equitable and fair. So I think 2024 will see more work around that taking place as well. But I think if I had a dream for 2024, it's, how do you make workplaces more inclusive for people to be the best version of themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, just to round off on the conversation that we've been having around diversity and neuro inclusivity, is it getting better, do you think?
I think it certainly is. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've been talking to an organisation before we started our conversation today, and 6 months ago this wasn't even on their radar. Now they have the champions networks. They have an exec sponsor who's supporting these areas. Have they resolved the problem of how to hire more neuro inclusive talent? No, but what they're at least doing is saying, look, if you're in the organisation, we're trying to learn and understand how we can support you better. That will entail how they hire people and how they're supported when they come in changes as well. So, yeah, I think that it's fair to say we are starting to see progress, and I think there's lots of podcasts, there's lots of organisations now trying to help and champion this superpower that companies can use.
And just with regards to the specific role that you provide to organisations, Kalpesh, I'm guessing on some of these topics, it's actually quite helpful for organisations to have somebody from the outside nurturing and coaching and sort of driving these programs forward. Is it?
Yeah, I think and again, I'll go back to sort of models if you want to think of it that way. I enjoy going into organisations and actually helping them make that change and giving that outside viewpoint. And quite often you need someone externally that can basically hold the mirror up to tell you these are the things you already know. I'm just going to point them out for you. What I always try and make sure is when I'm talking to any organisation, I have a stakeholder who is internal. So when I do walk away or I move on to doing something different with the organisation, that work doesn't stop and fall over. The danger of whenever you just hire externals to come and drive a program is they walk away, the program dies, and then you have to come back to it again a year, 2 years back down the line. So my advice is, yes, you should use externals to help give you a viewpoint that you may not have internally, and sometimes also hold the mirror up for you. But make sure you have someone internally that can carry on and continue that work as part of their day job.
Well, Kalpesh, we're out of time. Thanks very much for coming on the programme today, and I'll see you at the next discussion panel.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. Take care.
Cheers now. Bye-bye.